Hello. A lot of people see Jesu as a wise person and they take considerable comfort from his words and ideas about living and living correctly. The wisdom about forgiving others has been investigated with modern scientific inquiry in many different countries. I can list some of them when I look in my journals portal, and I've seen research from China, the USA, Poland, France, the UK, many countries around the world, surprisingly, saying all the sorts of things that forgiveness can help us with. When you forgive, all sorts of things go for the better. The list of things, of course, not comprehensive this, but it's a lot. Diabetes, depression, offending behavior, post-traumatic stress disorder, hematic dialysis, pain, increased capacity for romantic relationships increases, end-of-life care is assisted by us forgiving the pressures that we've had in life from people, blood pressure, grief. You might find yourself amongst those lists. It's pretty amazing. Of course, there are exceptions where loss is irreparable. It becomes extremely difficult to do forgiveness. And we've also been able to see, and there's various studies of this too, the way in which forgiving actually alters part of the brain and makes it function differently, so that hormones operate in a different way, and then our behaviour changes, and all through an astounding range of things. So certainly the wisdom of Jesu was very prevalent. But I want to tell you a story, because I'd like to make the gospel itself more clear. And the story concerns my primary school, and there comes a teacher, new teacher to us, ardent Christian, sort of carries his Bible into class with him, very enthusiastic young man. I've never forgotten him. And of course, you can guess that he actually forgave the pupils for what they did very quickly. Forgiveness was at the forefront of his agenda. And, well, you can guess then what happened. And of course, we didn't learn much. Maybe we learnt the essentials of rioting. And of course, the inevitable happened, that he has to leave, and he left in disgrace. Probably, you won't guess the next bit, that the next we heard of this man was that he was missing overboard from a steamer on the way to New Zealand. Maybe there was a moment when he forgot, when he couldn't accept himself, that God might be able to accept his disgrace. Now, I could list other follies that come from misunderstanding this gospel. How about all those women murdered for forgiving abusive and constantly abusive husbands? And many other situations where advantage has been taken because people have taken forgiving too literally. And who says that you have to forgive people immediately they've done wrong? Doesn't say that in the gospel. And where does it say that you can't have restorative justice as part of the forgiveness? Where does it say that you can do it just like that, without having to spend time and effort working towards a forgiving position? And where does it say that you're always going to succeed at it? Sometimes we find ourselves unable to forgive. It's like this, that Jesus wasn't a social scientist or psychologist. He didn't say these things to prescribe for our well-being. Forgive someone who's wronged you and it'll do you good. No, that's not the message. He was wishing to portray the nature of God, that our actions should emulate the fundamental principles of being itself. Now, strangely, there's an irony in this gospel which won't have escaped your notice. There wasn't much forgiveness for the unjust steward. I'm afraid to say, torture, long incarceration and loss. And we at the ancient parish of St Mary with St George at Hornsey don't go in for torture and incarceration unless you regard being in a service at church in that sort of light. So what's this writer, Matthew, doing with this emphasis? Is it an Old Testament punitive outlook that's crept in? He added it in, as it were, to please a particular group of people? Or is it maybe a reflection of how people got treated by bosses in that part of the world at that time? Or maybe it reflects Jesus in an earlier opinion in his ministry that perhaps hadn't evolved fully to a fuller understanding. Or could it be that some wrongs are so awful that only God, in time and out of time, could unravel the travesties of individual and collective guilt? We, alas, can name much of that in our lifetime that seem to be unforgivable. Pol Pot currently in the news, Hitler, Stalin, the unbelievable waste that nuclear arms brings about, and our murder of the planet, say it again, and our murder of the planet, and we're all implicated. Maybe this is something that only God can do in time, and maybe we just can't quite forgive ourselves. We need him. Perhaps only then shall the wolf and the lamb graze together, and the lion eat straw like an ox.